It started like any other quiet night at the Deep Space Array in New Mexico. Cool desert air, stars sharp and bright overhead, and the low hum of giant radio dishes scanning the sky for whispers from the universe. No one expected anything unusual. Scientists were used to static, cosmic noise, maybe a distant pulsar blinking like a lighthouse. But then, just after 9 p.m., something changed. One of the junior analysts noticed a signal that didn't belong. It wasn't random. It pulsed in a pattern: 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Prime numbers. The kind of sequence nature doesn't make on its own. The kind that says, someone's trying to talk. At first, they thought it was a glitch. Maybe a satellite had gone off course, or a prank from another observatory. But the signal kept coming, stronger now, clearer. And it was coming from TRAPPIST-1, a star system 40 light-years away, known for its 7 Earth-sized planets. That alone sent a chill through the control room. Within minutes, the team called in senior staff. Coffee cups were abandoned, screens filled with data streams. And then, the real shock hit. Embedded in the signal were words. Not just any words, phrases in English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, and more. All saying the same thing over and over like a warning carved into the fabric of space itself. To the species of Earth, you are hereby declared hostile. Cease all expansion beyond your atmosphere. Compliance window 12 hours. Non-compliance will be met with neutralization. Silence fell over the room. Someone dropped a pen. It clattered like a gunshot. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't a drill. Someone or something out there had just declared war on humanity. And they'd given less than half a day to respond. News spread faster than anyone could control. A technician, shaken and wide-eyed, texted a friend. That friend posted a blurry screenshot online. Within an hour, it was trending worldwide. Governments tried to stay calm, but behind closed doors, panic was already spreading. Emergency lines lit up in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, Brussels. Military commanders were pulled from sleep. Space agencies scrambled to verify the signal. Was it real? Could it be faked? But the evidence was hard to ignore. The signal's origin point matched known coordinates of TRAPPIST-1. Its structure was too complex for any known human technology to fake without leaving traces. And the language, it wasn't just translated. It used cultural references, idioms, even historical phrasing that suggested deep study of human civilization. People began to wonder, had we been watched all along? In cities across the globe, normal life started to unravel. A grocery store in Toronto sold out of bottled water in 20 minutes. In Mumbai, families gathered on rooftops staring at the sky as if expecting fire to rain down. In rural Kenya, village elders lit ceremonial fires praying to ancestors for protection from sky spirits. Online, the theories exploded. Some said it was God's final test. Others claimed it was a secret government experiment gone wrong. A few insisted it was aliens tired of our pollution, our wars, our noise. But one thing united everyone: fear. Not the kind of fear that makes you jump at shadows, but the deep, cold kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about your place in the universe. For thousands of years, humans had looked up and wondered if we were alone. Now it seemed we had our answer, and it wasn't friendly. Back at the observatory, scientists worked non-stop, feeding the signal into every analysis tool they had. They checked for hidden codes, secondary messages, anything that might explain the motive. One researcher noticed something odd. The message described Earth's atmosphere as nitrogen-oxygen dominant with trace methane and rising CO2. That phrasing hadn't been used in scientific papers since the early 2000s. Why would an advanced alien civilization use outdated data? But no one had time to dwell on that detail. The clock was ticking. 11 hours left. Governments began issuing public statements trying to project calm. "We are assessing the situation," said one official, voice tight with strain. "There is no immediate threat." But everyone could hear the lie in it. If there was no threat, why were fighter jets suddenly patrolling the skies over major cities? Why were nuclear submarines going silent? Meanwhile, a small team at a university lab in California managed to isolate a faint harmonic layer beneath the main message. When cleaned up, it played a sound just 3 seconds long. It was a recording of a human child laughing. No one knew why it was there. Some cried when they heard it. Others called it a taunt. As midnight approached in some time zones, churches filled. Mosques echoed with prayer. Temples burned incense. People held their loved ones tighter. Parents whispered reassurances they didn't believe. Teenagers filmed TikToks with shaky hands, half joking, half terrified. If this is my last video, tell my dog I love him. And still the stars above remained silent except for that one signal, repeating its warning like a heartbeat from the void. No one slept. Not really. Even those who tried lay awake, listening for sirens, for explosions, for the sky to crack open. The world had never felt so small, so fragile. For the first time in history, every human, rich or poor, powerful or forgotten, shared the same terrifying thought. We are not in control. And in less than 12 hours, someone else would decide our fate. The night stretched on, heavy with dread. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Curiosity, defiance, even hope. Because if this message was real, it meant we weren't alone. And if it wasn't, then the real enemy might be closer than anyone imagined. But that was a thought for later. For now, all anyone could do was watch the clock and wait. The hours after the message dropped felt like watching a slow-motion train wreck. Everyone saw it coming, but no one knew how to stop it. By morning, in most places, the world had split into two kinds of people, those preparing for the end, and those refusing to believe it was real. Stock markets opened and immediately crashed. Not just a dip, but a free fall. Banks froze withdrawals in some countries. In others, ATMs ran dry within minutes. People weren't just scared of aliens. They were scared of each other. What if neighbors turned desperate? What if governments collapsed? What if someone launched a nuke just to go out swinging? Military bases worldwide went into lockdown. Fighter jets circled capitals like hawks. Submarines carrying nuclear warheads dove deep and went radio silent. Not because they expected space invaders, but because no one trusted what another country might do in panic. A rumor spread that one nation had already fired a warning shot into orbit. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. Fear doesn't need facts to spread. Meanwhile, space programs scrambled. The half-built space station orbiting Earth, meant to be humanity's next step toward Mars, suddenly looked like a giant target. Engineers worked frantically to shut down its external systems, dim its lights, make it look dead. One astronaut on board later said he spent the whole night staring out the window, half expecting to see something dark and massive blot out the stars. On the ground, protests erupted outside government buildings. Some demanded full disclosure. Tell us everything you know. Others shouted, shut down all rockets. Stop provoking them. A small but vocal group even claimed the message was a gift, a wake-up call to stop polluting, stop fighting, stop reaching for the stars like greedy children. In classrooms, teachers tried to explain what was happening to students who couldn't focus. Kids asked questions no adult could answer. Will they hurt my dog? Can they see us right now? Are we bad? Online, the chaos was worse. Deepfake videos popped up showing alien ships over New York, Tokyo, Rio. Grainy, shaky, but convincing enough to send more people into panic. Fact-checkers worked overtime, but truth moved slower than fear. Social media algorithms, trained to reward outrage and urgency, pushed the wildest theories to the top. Yet in the middle of all this, small acts of quiet courage kept happening. A baker in Lisbon stayed open all night, giving away bread to anyone who looked lost or scared. In Jakarta, strangers formed human chains around hospitals to keep them safe from potential looting. In a tiny town in Nebraska, a retired physics teacher set up a telescope in his driveway and invited neighbors to look at the stars, not to search for threats, but to remember how beautiful the universe could be. Not everyone bought the message. Some scientists argued it had to be a hoax, too perfect, too dramatic. Why would an advanced civilization capable of crossing light years send a threat like a bad sci-fi script? And why give only 12 hours? If they could destroy us, why warn us at all? One researcher pointed out something strange. The message referred to Earth's atmosphere using data from the early 2000s, before methane levels spiked, before certain satellites mapped the planet in high detail. If these beings had been watching us for decades, why use old info? Unless they weren't watching us now. Unless they'd built their message from old records. But that theory got drowned out. Because just as doubt began to creep in, something new happened. At 3:17 a.m. UTC, a second signal arrived. This one wasn't words. It was images, projected onto every major broadcast frequency, TV, radio, even emergency alert systems, was a looping animation of Earth. But it wasn't the blue marble we knew. This version had red zones pulsing over cities, launch sites, and orbital paths. Labels flashed in clean, clinical text. Contamination risk, high. Expansion vector, active. Neutralization protocol, standby. People screamed. Some fainted. Others recorded it on their phones, hands trembling. The image lasted only 47 seconds before vanishing, but it was enough. Now it wasn't just a voice in the dark. It was a map. A target list. Governments lost what little control they had left. A few countries activated emergency broadcast systems, urging citizens to stay indoors. Others went silent, possibly overwhelmed. In one nation, the president gave a live address, voice shaking but steady. "We do not know who sent this. But if this is war, we will not meet it with fear alone. We will meet it with truth, with unity, and with the dignity of our shared humanity." The speech went viral, not because it solved anything, but because for a moment it made people feel less alone. Back at observatories and labs, scientists worked without sleep. Coffee ran out. Tempers flared. But no one quit. They reran the data, checked for signal echoes, triangulated the source again and again. And then someone noticed something odd. The second signal. It hadn't come from deep space. It had bounced off something much closer. Something in Earth's own orbit. A technician in Norway cross-referenced satellite logs and found a match. An old Soviet-era communication satellite, long thought dead, had suddenly woken up 3 weeks earlier. It wasn't broadcasting anything then, just listening. But now it was relaying the alien message like a mirror in the sky. That changed everything. If the signal was being rebroadcast from near-Earth orbit, then the original message might not be from TRAPPIST-1 at all. It could have been sent from here. By someone on Earth. The idea was terrifying, but also a relief. Because if it was human-made, then there was no alien fleet. No cosmic judgment. Just a very clever, very dangerous lie, but who would do this, and why? As the hours ticked down, now less than 6 left, conspiracy theories shifted. Instead of fearing the stars, people began to fear their own kind. Was it a rogue nation trying to freeze global space efforts? A billionaire with a twisted vision of saving the planet by scaring everyone back to Earth? Or something even more personal? A group of scientists so horrified by climate collapse and space militarization that they'd rather fake an alien threat than watch humanity keep digging its own grave. No one knew. But the possibility hung in the air like smoke. Maybe the real war wasn't against humans from another world, but against the part of ourselves that refuses to change. And with only a few hours left before the deadline, the world held its breath, not waiting for bombs from the sky, but for the truth to rise from the shadows. The night deepened, but no one was sleeping. Not in government bunkers, not in crowded apartments, not even in remote villages where the internet barely reached. The whole planet felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for midnight, the moment the message said everything would change. Then, just before 11:50 p.m. UTC, the sky over Geneva flickered, not with lightning, not with meteors, but with light, soft, pulsing, almost gentle, like a ripple across a pond. People filming on their phones captured it, a shimmer in the air followed by a sudden burst of color that formed shapes. Within seconds, the same image that had appeared on broadcast earlier reappeared, but this time it was in the sky itself. A ghostly outline of Earth, red zones glowing like warning lights floating above the city like a silent judgment. Gasps turned into shouts. Some dropped to their knees. Others ran inside, pulling their children close. But then, nothing happened. No explosions, no beams of energy, no ships descending from the clouds. Just silence, and that image fading slowly like smoke in the wind. In the underground command center beneath Geneva, where world leaders and emergency coordinators had gathered, the tension was thick enough to choke on. One official finally stood up, walked to the mic, and spoke to every nation tuned in. "We don't know who or what sent this message, but if this is war, we will not cower, we will not hide, and we will not let fear decide our future." His voice didn't shake. That mattered more than people realized. At the same time, something strange was happening far from the headlines. Amateur radio operators in Argentina, Japan, and New Zealand, all working alone in garages or backyard sheds, began picking up faint, overlapping signals. These weren't coming from deep space. They were bouncing off low-orbit paths, and they didn't match any known satellite frequency. One of them, A retired schoolteacher in Chile recorded the signal and ran it through an old decoding program he'd built for fun. What came out wasn't alien language. It was a repeating loop of the original threat message, but with tiny digital fingerprints hidden in the background, like a watermark on a photo. He sent his findings to a university lab in Berlin. Within 20 minutes, experts confirmed it. The signal had been artificially layered. Someone had taken a base transmission and wrapped it in cosmic noise to make it sound like it came from light years away. But the core signal? It was clean. Too clean, human-made. That discovery didn't go public right away. Too risky. If people learned the alien war might be a hoax in the final hour, chaos could get worse. Imagine the rage, fear turning into fury directed at each other. So the information stayed locked in secure channels, shared only between a handful of trusted agencies. But while governments debated what to do, ordinary people were already sensing something was off. Why hadn't anything happened? If an advanced civilization could cross 40 light years, why send a vague warning instead of just acting? Why use outdated atmospheric data? Why include a child's laugh in the signal? None of it made sense for a real invasion. It felt theatrical, like a performance. In online forums that hadn't been overrun by panic, a few calm voices started asking hard questions. If they're so powerful, why give us 12 hours? Why threaten neutralization but show no weapons? Wouldn't a real alien message be more alien? These questions spread slowly like cracks in ice. Not enough to break the fear, but enough to make some people pause. Back in New Mexico, the team at the Deep Space Array ran one last check. They pointed their biggest dish not at TRAPPIST-1, but at the patch of sky where the second signal seemed to originate. What they found stunned them. No energy signature, no propulsion trails, no heat bloom. Nothing that would suggest a massive object or even a small probe was there. It was empty space. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the European Space Agency's cyber unit, a young analyst noticed something no one else had. The alien message used a specific type of data compression, one that matched open-source software released by a scientific nonprofit 5 years earlier. That nonprofit? Funded by former astrophysicists who'd left mainstream, research after clashing with space, agencies over ethics and environmental impact. The pieces were starting to fit, but time was running out. At 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the deadline, cities around the world fell eerily quiet. Traffic stopped. Music shut off. Even the wind seemed to hold still. People stood on balconies, rooftops, street corners, eyes on the sky, hearts pounding. Then, midnight came and passed, no flash, no boom. No end of the world. Just the same stars, the same moon, the same earth spinning in the dark. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then slowly, people began to breathe again. Someone laughed. A nervous, relieved sound that spread like wildfire. In Tokyo, a street musician started playing a hopeful tune on his guitar. In Lagos, neighbors hugged in the street. In rural Canada, a family stepped outside and just looked up, tears in their eyes, grateful for the simple fact that tomorrow would still come. But relief didn't mean answers. Because if it wasn't aliens, then who did this and why? As dawn began to creep over the eastern horizon, a new kind of tension settled in. The fear of the unknown was gone, but now came the fear of betrayal. Someone had played the entire human race like a fiddle. They'd used our deepest hopes and worst fears against us, and they'd almost broken us. Yet in that fragile morning light, something else emerged too. Unity. For one night, borders didn't matter. Language didn't matter. Rich or poor, believer or skeptic, all had faced the same shadow together. And they'd survived it, not with weapons, but with patience, with doubt, with the stubborn human habit of looking for truth even when the world screams otherwise. Now the real work would begin. Not fighting aliens, but finding the truth, and making sure something like this never happened again. Because the scariest thing wasn't what came from the stars, it was what came from us. The sun rose on a world that had just survived a war that never happened, but the relief was short-lived. As people stepped outside, blinking in the morning light, the question on everyone's lips wasn't, "Are we safe?" but "Who did this to us?" It didn't take long for the truth to start unraveling. Within hours, cybersecurity teams from 3 different continents converged on the same clue. The signal hadn't come from deep space. It had been bounced off a decades-old satellite, one that had been quietly reactivated weeks before the message appeared. That satellite, long forgotten and drifting in low Earth orbit, had served as a mirror, reflecting a carefully crafted transmission back to the planet like a cosmic echo. Digging deeper, investigators traced the digital fingerprints in the signal's code. Buried beneath layers of fake cosmic noise were fragments of software, open-source tools, academic research papers, even old conference recordings. All of it pointed to a small fringe group of scientists and engineers who had once worked with major space agencies but walked away years ago. They'd grown disillusioned, not with science but with how it was being used. To them, humanity's rush into space wasn't exploration. It was escape. A way to avoid fixing Earth while dreaming of Mars colonies and asteroid mining. They watched climate reports get ignored, oceans fill with plastic, forests vanish, and saw governments pouring billions into rockets while children went hungry. To them, space wasn't the future. It was a distraction, a dangerous fantasy, so they made a choice. Not to destroy, but to shock. Their plan was simple. Create a message so terrifying, so convincing that the world would hit pause. Shut down launches, stop building space stations, turn inward and finally fix what was broken at home. They didn't want to hurt anyone. They believed they were saving everyone. But they hadn't counted on how deep fear runs in the human heart. As the evidence mounted, governments moved fast. Safe houses were raided in 3 countries. Hard drives were seized. Encrypted messages were cracked. The group hadn't hidden well. They never expected to be caught. Because they truly believed the world would thank them once the panic passed. One of them, during questioning, said quietly, "We didn't declare war on humanity. We declared war on humanity's self-destruction." That line spread quickly. Some called it noble. Others called it arrogance dressed up as care. How dare a handful of people decide what's best for billions? How dare they weaponize fear, even if their goal was peace? Public opinion split down the middle. Protests formed outside courthouses, one side holding signs that read, "They saved us from ourselves," the other shouting, "You don't scare people to make them wise." Schools held debates. News panels argued for hours. Grandparents told their grandchildren, "I lived through wars, pandemics, recessions, but this was different." Because the enemy wasn't out there. It was someone who thought they knew better than all of us. Meanwhile, space agencies faced a crisis of trust. People asked, "If this could be faked, what else have you hidden from us?" Launch schedules were paused, not by order, but by public pressure. Crowdfunding for private space missions dried up overnight. For the first time in decades, the dream of reaching the stars felt fragile. Yet something unexpected also happened. In the days after the hoax was revealed, more people started talking about Earth, not as a stepping stone, but as home. Community gardens sprouted in city lots. Beach cleanups drew record volunteers. A global petition to protect the oceans gathered millions of signatures in a week. Maybe the fear had been fake, but the feeling it stirred was real. We only have one planet. And it's worth fighting for. Scientists who had spent their lives studying distant worlds began shifting focus. One major observatory announced it would repurpose part of its array to monitor Earth's climate in real time. A rocket company pledged to use its tech to track deforestation, instead of building luxury space hotels even. The group behind the hoax had sparked something real, just not the way they'd planned. Back in courtrooms and interrogation rooms, the truth came out piece by piece. They'd spent 2 years building the signal, studied old alien contact protocols, used AI to mimic linguistic patterns from UN speeches and scientific journals. They'd even recorded that child's laugh from an old public domain educational video, hoping it would remind people what they were risking. They never intended for it to go this far. They thought governments would quietly verify the signal, realize it was a warning, and act behind closed doors. They never imagined the world would stop breathing for 12 hours. Now they faced serious charges, not for treason, but for mass endangerment, cybercrime, and inciting global panic. If convicted, they could spend decades in prison. But as their trial date neared, a strange thing happened. Letters poured in from teachers, farmers, nurses, students thanking them, condemning them, begging for understanding. One letter from a teenager in the Philippines read, "You scared me so bad I cried all night. But the next morning I planted a tree with my little brother. So, thank you." And also, never do that again. The world was angry, but it was also thinking. And that perhaps was the real victory, not for the hoaxers but for humanity itself. Because in the end, the interstellar war hadn't been fought with weapons or spaceships. It had been fought in living rooms, in hearts, in the space between fear and hope. And for once, hope had shown up just in time. Now the challenge wasn't about aliens or satellites. It was about trust, about listening, about building a future where we don't need fake wars to remember what matters. The stars were still there, silent and distant. But for now, everyone's eyes were on Earth, on each other. And that was exactly where they needed to be. Weeks passed. The panic faded like a bad dream you can't quite remember. But the world wasn't the same. People walked a little slower, talked a little softer, looked at the sky not with fear but with questions. The war had lasted less than a night, but its echo lingered in every decision, every conversation, every policy meeting held behind closed doors. Out of the chaos came something unexpected: agreement. Not perfect, not total, but real. Within 2 months, over 120 countries signed what became known as the Geneva Accords on Extraterrestrial Communication. The rules were simple. No single nation, company, or group could send or receive deep space messages without global oversight. All signals from Earth aimed at the stars would be reviewed by an international panel of scientists, ethicists, and public representatives. It wasn't about hiding from aliens. It was about making sure humanity spoke with one voice, not 1,000 shouting in the dark. Space programs didn't shut down, but they changed. Launches still happened, satellites still orbited, and plans for lunar research continued, but now with a new promise. Space exploration would serve Earth, not escape it. A joint mission was announced to use orbital tech to monitor melting ice caps in real time. Another project repurposed old rocket engines to power clean energy grids in remote regions. The dream of reaching Mars wasn't abandoned. It was just tied to a condition. We fix home first. Back in universities and labs, scientists who once competed for grants now shared data openly. A young researcher in Brazil published a paper titled "The War That Wasn't," which became required reading in schools worldwide. It didn't focus on the hoax or the satellite. It focused on how quickly fear spread, how easily truth got buried, and how fragile trust really is. The paper ended with a simple line: "The universe may be silent, but our choices echo louder than any signal." That line ended up on posters, t-shirts, even murals in city centers. Not as a slogan, but as a reminder. The people behind the fake message faced trial, not in secret, but in open court, broadcast live across the globe. They didn't deny what they'd done. Instead, they explained, calmly, sadly, how they'd watched forests burn, oceans acidify, and leaders ignore warnings for decades. They said they'd tried petitions, protests, papers. Nothing moved the needle. So they gambled on shock. "We thought," one of them said, "that if humanity believed the universe was watching, maybe we'd finally start watching ourselves." The court sentenced them to community service, not in prisons, but in schools, climate labs, and reforestation projects. They would spend years teaching, not hiding. Many saw it as too light a punishment. Others called it wise. Instead of locking them away, the world made them part of the healing. And healing did begin. In towns that had emptied during the panic, neighbors started gathering again, not in fear, but in shared meals and repair projects. In cities, rooftop gardens multiplied. Kids built science fair projects not about alien invasions, but about cleaning rivers and saving bees. A global Earth Hour turned into Earth Week, then Earth Month, as people realized they didn't need a crisis to care. They just needed to start. Even the night sky felt different. Stargazers returned to their telescopes not to search for threats but for wonder. Amateur astronomers hosted public viewings, pointing out Jupiter's storms or Saturn's rings, reminding everyone how small and how precious our world really is. "Look," they'd say, "that's where we live. Everything we love, everything we've ever known. Right there, just a pale blue dot." And yet the listening didn't stop. Radio telescopes still swept the heavens day and night. Not because people expected war, but because curiosity is part of being human. We look up not just to escape, but to understand. And now we do it with more humility. We know that silence from the stars doesn't mean we're alone. It might just mean the universe is waiting to see what we do next. Years later, when children asked, "Was there really an alien war?" adults would smile and say no, but for one night we all believed there was, and that night changed us. Because the real story wasn't about signals from space. It was about what happened here, on the ground, in homes, in hearts. It was about how close we came to breaking, and how we chose instead to bend toward each other. No lasers fired, no cities fell, no species was erased, but something did end that night. The illusion that we could keep living as if Earth were disposable. And something began. A quiet, steady movement to treat our planet not as a launch pad, but as a home worth protecting. Today, the deep space array still hums under the New Mexico stars. The dishes turn slowly, listening, but now next to the control room there's a small plaque. It doesn't mention aliens or wars. It just says, "On the night the sky spoke, humanity finally listened to itself." And in the end, that was enough.